So, who are you? Oh. So, who are you? Oh. That's a really dumb opening, and I am stupidly proud of it. Okay, so let's talk about, I was going to say big spoilers, except I don't think there's any way for me to even, title this without it being some kind of spoiler, and I'd be a little bit more reticent to do that, except the BBC official Doctor Who friggin' channel, the day after Part 1 of Spyfall aired, put up a video that both the title and the thumbnail were massive spoilers for this. So here we go. Look, the Master's back, and we have a whole new one. And I see a lot of questions getting asked about who is this Master, where does he fit in the Master's timeline? Does he follow after Missy? If so, how? Because with what happened to Missy, that should be the end of the Master's timeline. If he does follow after Missy, does that mean that they have completely negated the arc that Missy went through for that? If he doesn't come in after Missy, then where in the Master's timeline does he fit? Now, before I actually dig into this, can I just be upfront about something? Personally, I don't really care. Now, I don't want to be dismissive about that. I understand lots of fans do care. But for me, I don't need an answer to that. The Master's back. Cool. Awesome. I kind of take that as a given that it was going to happen. Now, if they ever offer specifics, I will scrutinize them to see if they make sense. But I'm kind of weird like that. Oftentimes with me, you're better off going for a minimal explanation than a detailed one. Because whatever details you give me, I will scrutinize. Often, though not always, often if you give me fewer details, I'll be more okay with that because I have less to pick apart. And my brain just kind of relaxes and goes, just roll with it. Master's back. Cool. But accepting that, many people do care, and it is kind of an interesting question to address and to think about. I don't have the secret answer, but let's look at the possibilities and let's discuss the options here. Now, the obvious assumption is that this Master follows on from Missy, and that's not an unfair assumption to make. We have pretty much always seen the Master, so far as we know, in chronological order of his incarnations. And same with the Doctor, for that matter. Yes, there's the multi-Doctor stories that cross over, but we've been following, one that follows after the other. Barring, again, the one multi-Master story that actually happened in the show. So, that's the obvious assumption, but there's a couple of things about that I'm not going to say are necessarily problems, but are definitely hang-ups and have some people a little bit iffy about that idea. The first is, the way Missy died, it really was heavily implied that the Master should not be able to regenerate again after that. Now, does that mean that the Master can't? Of course it doesn't. The Master wasn't supposed to be able to come back at the end of Last of the Time Lords either. But, it was obvious that they were going to. They planted the ring or whatever, but, they didn't know how they were going to do it yet. But there's always a way around that. But as it stands right now, that shouldn't happen. And the other thing is, and this seems to be the bigger hang-up for people, especially people who like Missy, which I do, though again, this isn't as big a hang-up for me personally. I'll get to why in a second. There is the issue of Missy basically had an arc of finding her friendship with the Doctor again. Now, she didn't suddenly become a good person. She was still kind of terrible, which is part of why she was still awesome. But, you know, she softened. She was prepared to side with him when the chips were down. And to have the Master going back to these big elaborate plans to take over, to dominate, and also to kill the Doctor, kind of fly in the face of that. And I understand that argument, but at the same time, just speaking personally, I don't consider that to be a disqualifying factor, just because the Master is allowed to have a little bit of a personality reset the same way the Doctor does. Actually, I'd say the Master has gone through a much more rigidly defined personality than the Doctor has in terms of regeneration over regeneration. So, you know, reconnecting back to something from earlier is not completely out of the question if, for whatever reason, a regeneration following Missy did kick off. That said, while I do feel that is a viable explanation, it's also a little bit of a cop-out. And I think, again, while it may not bother me, especially personally, it's probably not the direction that they should ever go if they do decide to confirm exactly where the new I'm probably going to refer to him as O, at least for the purposes of this video, to distinguish him from the others. So we've got, you know, him coming in after Missy, I think just is going to just tick a lot of people off. And you don't have to. Because here's the fun thing about the Master. We don't know every regeneration of the Master. We know every regeneration of the Doctor. There were at times previous the possibility that the first Doctor, William Hartnell's Doctor, was not in fact his first incarnation. That's pretty much shot down at this point. Because of, you know, the things really getting nailed down in terms of how many regenerations there have been as locked down in Time of the Doctor. So we've seen every incarnation of the Doctor. We haven't seen every incarnation of the Master. In fact, we're missing a lot. So who have we seen so far? We've seen Roger Delgado. Now, it's debatable whether you want to count the Crispy Master as a separate incarnation or not, because that is possibly still technically the same incarnation, just much, much closer to death. But for the sake of counting, sure, for right now, we'll count that. We know that transition directly into the Anthony Ainley Doctor, because that was the form that took over Tremas. So we've got now at most 3, and this one did not necessarily lead into that one. And then from Tremas, we have the Eric Roberts Master, and we don't know what incarnation. Now, again, we didn't see that to that, so we got more gap here where it could have been anything. And then we've got the War Master, which was Derek Jacobi, met in Utopia, gotten filled out in some Big Finish a bit. But we know that the Master was basically resurrected by the Time Lords and given a whole new regeneration cycle. Remember that. So from War Master to John Sim, we know that one, direct. And then for John Sim to Missy, question mark? So, I went back and rewatched it. In World and, no, sorry, not World Enough Time, in The Doctor Falls, it is implied that John Sim is probably the immediate preceding incarnation before Missy, but that's not confirmed. That's not 100%. We don't know that for certain. So we've got a lot of gaps. And we also don't even know if the Roger Delgado Master was the first Master. So we've got a lot of gaps in here where O could slot in. And like I said, it's not just a matter of fitting in between some. There could have been multiple regenerations in between any number of these. Just because, as I said, the Master actually got a whole new regeneration cycle. So, minimum then, if he got a whole new regeneration cycle, that's 13 incarnations for each. That's minimum 26 versions of the Master. And we have currently accounted for, if we count 8 maximum, assuming that the crispy one is not actually the same one as Roger Delgado. We've got 8. There's a lot. There's a lot of slots for him to fit in. Now, that being said, there's still probably some eliminations that we can do. It's very unlikely that he is in the early half of the Master's life. Just because the amount of stuff that he is seeing, encountering, dealing with, it doesn't quite line up. The idea that somebody, say, earlier than Delgado would be the case. And also, more than that, O has to be an incarnation that the Master has not met the Doctor in before, because he sneaks in and the Doctor doesn't recognize him. So whatever incarnation of the Master it is, it can't be one that the Doctor encountered before, which also makes pre-Delgado less likely. Now, we don't know for a fact that every incarnation of the Master and the Doctor, like, hung out and did stuff together, but given the nature of their friendship, that's not a huge leap. It's not a given. It's not a lockdown. But again, the idea of it being from prior to that, especially with something like you can mention the tissue compressor thing, which was something the older Master used, and I think some people are even sort of thinking, ooh, maybe that's an indication that he's an earlier incarnation. He seems to be treating it like a throwback, though. At least to my read on it. And the other thing is, I don't, especially with what we saw in Spyfall Part 2, I don't think that it makes any sense for him to be any earlier than John Sim. And so I'm not going to break down each individual gap there, leading up to him. Because if what he said was accurate in terms of, like, he wrecked Gallifrey, then it wouldn't make a ton of sense if he is pre-John Sim, for John Sim to have the reaction that he does when the Doctor tells him Gallifrey is gone. Because when he hears that, he's like, how can Gallifrey be gone? He has disbelief about that. And it doesn't make sense if, like, he himself kind of took a torch to the place prior to the events of the John Sim Master and the David Tennant Doctor. So, I think just based on that, most likely, it is the cleanest fit for him to come in between John Sim and Missy. That would spare Missy's arc from, that doesn't get reversed. They don't have to account for, how more regenerations after Missy happen. Honestly, they could have 13 more than that. They could have, like, they could have, like, 18 more incarnations of the Master. And they could all theoretically slot between John Sim and Missy and not have to ever address Matt. And just have Missy be the end. They could actually do that. I'll be curious to see if they ever do answer definitively where this version of the Master falls, where O lands. Because I almost kind of think it's in their best interest to not, and just leave us squirming on the hook and come up with a headcanon that works best for us. Because, that's basically what I'm going to do anyway. But not everyone's like me. Some people really want to know! So given that, what are your thoughts? This new Master, where does he fit? Are you liking him? Enjoying him? Not liking him? I think he's pretty good so far. Want to see more? So whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about a bunch of stuff to do. You know the things. Likes and subscribes and ring the bell. It does stuff, I think. I don't know. I've also got a Patreon. If you want to help me out, that would help. And other stuff besides. Links in the description. You don't have to do any of it, though, because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.